The alarm bells rang through the white halls of New Haven Colony. Administrator Vextel ran on his long legs toward the communications center. His blue skin turned pale with fear. The peaceful world he had helped build for 20 years was under attack. How many ships? He asked the young technician at the controls. 50 warships, sir. Maybe more coming. The technician's voice shook. They have the black and red markings. It's the Korthok Empire. Vexto felt his heart sink. The Korthok were known across the galaxy as brutal warriors. They took planets by force and turned the people into slaves. They stripped worlds bare and left nothing behind but empty rock. Send the distress call to the Galactic Defense Coalition right now, Vextel ordered. Tell them we need military help immediately. The message went out across space. Within hours, an answer came back. Vextel read it 3 times before he believed it. Coalition forces are spread thin across the outer rim. We can send 1 squad from Earth. 50 soldiers maximum. They will arrive in 2 days. Hold your position, Earth. Vextel said out loud. What is Earth? His aide, a nervous female named Kefla, checked the computer files. It says here that Earth is a Class 12 death world in the Sol system. The humans there are a young species. They only joined the coalition 5 years ago. A death world. Vextel felt even worse. Death worlds were planets so dangerous that most species could not survive there. The air was poison, the weather was deadly, or the animals were too fierce. How can warriors from such a place help us against the Korthok? I don't know, sir, Kefla said quietly. But they are all we have. 2 days later, a small ship appeared in the sky above New Haven. It was gray and simple looking, not like the beautiful white ships of the Coalition or the massive black ships of the Korthok. This ship looked like it was built for war. Vextel went to the landing pad with a group of his people. They watched as the ship's doors opened. Smoke came out first, then the sound of heavy boots on metal. The first human to step out was a male with short brown hair and dark eyes. He wore green and brown clothing that looked tough and practical. A large weapon hung on his back. Behind him came more humans, both males and females. They all looked the same, serious, alert, and ready for trouble. I am Captain Jake Morrison, the first human said. His voice was deep and calm. This is Lieutenant Amy Brooks and Sergeant Mike Turner. We are here to help defend your colony. Vex looked at the small group of humans. There were only 50 of them, just like the message had said. They looked so different from his people. Where the Zephyrians were tall and thin with smooth blue skin, the humans were shorter and more solid. Their skin was different colors, some light, some dark, some in between. But they all had the same look in their eyes, like they had seen terrible things and were not afraid. Captain Morrison, Vextel said, trying to be polite. We are grateful for your help, but I must ask 50 soldiers against the entire Korthok fleet. How can this work? Captain Morrison looked around at the colony. His eyes took in everything. The buildings, the roads, the hills in the distance. How many Korthok soldiers have landed so far? About 500, Vextel answered. But more ships are coming. 500 is not so many, Captain Morrison said. Lieutenant Brooks nodded in agreement. We have faced worse odds before. A young Zephorian male named Tekver stepped forward. But Captain, your people come from a death world. Surely you are not used to civilized warfare. We have energy shields and plasma weapons. This is not like fighting wild animals. Sergeant Mike Turner laughed. It was not a happy sound. Kid, where we come from, the animals are the least of our problems. We fight storms that can tear buildings apart. We survive in places where the air can kill you. We deal with earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, and ice ages. A few Korthok warriors don't scare us much. The humans began to unload their equipment from the ship. Vextel watched in surprise. Their weapons looked simple compared to Zephyrian technology, But there was something about the way the humans handled them that made him think. These simple tools might be more dangerous than they appeared. "What is your plan, Captain?" Vextol asked. "First, we study the enemy," Morrison replied. "Then we find their weak points. Then we hit them where they don't expect it. Simple strategy, but it works." "The Korthok have superior numbers and technology," Kefla said. "How can simple strategy defeat that?" Lieutenant Amy Brooks spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet but strong. "Because numbers and technology don't win wars. Will and determination win wars, and humans have plenty of both." As the humans set up their camp, the Zephyrians whispered among themselves. These strange beings from the Deathworld did not seem afraid of anything. They moved with confidence and purpose. But could 50 of them really stand against hundreds of Korthok warriors? That night, Vextol could not sleep. He stood at his window and looked out at the human camp. Small lights moved in the darkness as the soldiers took turns watching for enemies. They never stopped being alert. They never relaxed. Maybe, Vextol thought, there was more to these humans than met the eye. Maybe coming from a Deathworld had taught them things that peaceful species like his own could never learn. Tomorrow, they would find out if 50 humans could save an entire world. The attack came at dawn. Vextol woke to the sound of explosions in the distance. Red lights flashed in his room as the colony's warning system activated. He ran to the command center, where his people were already working frantically at their control panels. "Korthak ground forces are moving toward the main settlement," reported Kefla. 300 soldiers, with heavy weapons and battle armor. Through the window Vextol could see the approaching enemy. The Korthok were tall and muscular, with gray skin and fierce yellow eyes. They wore black metal armor and carried weapons that glowed with deadly energy. Their war cries echoed across the peaceful farmland of New Haven. "Activate the energy shields," Vextol ordered. "All civilian population to the underground shelters." The colony's defensive shields came online, creating a shimmering blue barrier around the settlement. For a moment, Vextol felt hope. The shields had never failed before. Then the Korthok opened fire. Their plasma cannons sent streams of burning energy against the shields. The blue barrier flickered and sparked. Warning alarms sounded as the shield generators began to overheat. "Sir, the shields are failing," called out a technician. "They won't last another 10 minutes. Vextol grabbed his communication device. "Captain Morrison, we need your help. The Korthok are attacking our main settlement." Morrison's voice came back calm and steady. "We see them. My team is moving into position now. Keep your people in the shelters." "But Captain, there are 300 of them. How can 50 humans trust us?" Morrison said. The communication cut off. The energy shields collapsed with a flash of sparks. The Korthok warriors roared in victory and charged toward the settlement. Their leader, a massive beast with scars covering his face, raised his weapon and pointed at the largest building. Suddenly, the sound of human weapons filled the air. It was different from the high whine of energy weapons. These made sharp cracking sounds like thunder. The lead Korthok warrior stumbled and fell. Then another. Then another. From hidden positions around the settlement, the humans opened fire. Vextol watched in amazement as Private Danny Rodriguez appeared on a rooftop, holding a large weapon that sent explosive shells into the enemy ranks. The young human showed no fear as Korthok plasma bolts flew around him. "Impossible," whispered Kefla. "He should be dead by now." But Rodriguez was not dead. He moved quickly from position to position, always staying ahead of the enemy fire. When his weapon ran out of ammunition, he drew a smaller gun and kept shooting. On the ground, Sergeant Mike Turner led a group of Zephyrian volunteers in a counterattack. The peaceful colonists had never fought before, but Turner's calm voice guided them forward. "Stay low, move fast, and don't think about fear," he told them. "Fear gets you killed." Lieutenant Amy Brooks appeared behind a group of Korthok soldiers. She moved so quietly that they never heard her coming. Her small knife flashed in the morning light, and 3 enemy warriors fell before the others even knew she was there. The Korthok commander, War Chief Grakthar, watched his forces being pushed back by the strange pale warriors. He had fought many battles across the galaxy, but he had never seen anything like this. These humans fought with a combination of skill and ferocity that made no sense. What are these creatures? He growled to his aide. They move like predators, but they use tactics like trained soldiers. I don't know, War Chief, the aide replied, but they are killing our warriors faster than we can advance. Corporal Steve Martinez crawled through the tall grass at the edge of the battlefield. His job was to get close to the Korthok command, position, and report their numbers. But as he watched through his scope, he saw something that made him smile. The enemy was already starting to retreat. Staff Sergeant Kelly Wright coordinated the human defense from a hidden position in the center of town. She spoke quietly into her communication device, directing each team member to where they were needed most. Rodriguez, move to Building 7. Turner, enemy reinforcements coming from the east. Brooks, nice work on those flankers. The humans fought like they were part of a single mind. When one needed help, another was already moving to assist. When ammunition ran low, someone always appeared with more. They seemed to know exactly where each team member was at all times. Vextel watched the battle from his command center. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. The Korthak, who had conquered dozens of worlds, were being beaten by 50 humans. Not just beaten, they were being destroyed. How are they doing this? He asked aloud. Tekfer, the young Zephyr, who had questioned the humans' abilities, stood beside him with wide eyes. Look at how they move, Administrator. They don't fight like civilized beings. They fight like ... like predators, Vextel finished. Like beings who evolved on a world that was trying to kill them every day. The battle lasted only 2 hours. When it was over, the Korthok forces were in full retreat. Nearly half of their warriors were dead or wounded. The humans had lost no one, though several had minor injuries. Captain Morrison walked into the command center. His clothing was dirty, and there was a small cut on his forehead, but he looked calm and relaxed. The immediate threat is over, he reported, but this was just a probe. The real attack will come later. A probe, Vextel said. 300 warriors with heavy weapons was just a probe. War Chief Grakthar was testing us, Morrison explained. He wanted to see what we could do. Now he knows. And what will he do now? Asked Kefla. Morrison looked out the window toward the distant Korthok camp. Now he'll get serious. He'll bring more soldiers and better weapons. He'll try different tactics. But that's okay. We'll be ready for him. As the humans tended to their equipment and prepared for the next battle, the Zephyrians began to understand something important. These warriors from Earth were not just soldiers. They were survivors from a world so dangerous that it had shaped them into something unique in the galaxy. War Chief Grakthar stood in his command ship, looking down at the retreat of his forces. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something he had not experienced before: doubt. These humans were unlike any enemy he had ever faced. Bring me information about this species, he ordered his intelligence officer. I want to know everything about their home world. If we are going to defeat them, we need to understand what made them into such fierce warriors. The war for New Haven had truly begun. War Chief Grakthar studied the holographic display in his command center. The data about Earth made his blood run cold. Average gravity was 1.2 times galactic standard. Atmospheric pressure that would crush most species. Extreme weather patterns that changed without warning, and the lifeforms predators that could kill beings twice their size. These humans evolved in hell, he muttered to his intelligence officer. No wonder they fight like demons. What are your orders, War Chief? Asked his second-in-command. Grakthar thought carefully. Direct assault had failed badly. Time for new tactics. We will break them down slowly. Small attacks. Hit their supply lines. Pick off isolated groups. Make them afraid to leave their safe places. Over the next week, the Korthok began their new strategy. Small groups of warriors would appear suddenly, attack a human patrol or supply convoy, then disappear into the wilderness. They used their superior numbers to be everywhere at once. Captain Morrison called his team together in the colony's meeting hall. The enemy has changed tactics, he told them. They are trying to wear us down with hit-and-run attacks. We need to adapt. What do you suggest, sir? Asked Lieutenant Brooks. Morrison looked at his map of the surrounding area. We split into smaller teams. If they want to play hunter, we'll show them what real hunters look like. Sergeant Turner raised his hand. Captain, these Korthok know this planet better than we do. They've been here for weeks, setting up camps and supply lines. Morrison smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Turner, where we come from, knowing the local area is just the beginning. Real hunting is about understanding your prey. The humans, divided into teams of 5 or 6. Each team had a specific area to patrol and protect. But instead of waiting for attacks, they began to hunt the hunters. Corporal Steve Martinez led his reconnaissance team into the northern hills. For 3 days, they tracked a group of 15 Korthok warriors who had been attacking supply convoys. Martinez used skills he had learned hunting deer in the forests of Earth. But instead of deer, he was tracking alien soldiers. Their leader is careless, he whispered to Private Ryan Clark. See how the footprints are deeper on the left side. He favors his left leg. Probably an old injury. And look at this broken branch. They're moving in single file to hide their numbers, but that just makes them easier to follow. Clark studied the tracks with amazement. How can you tell all that from some footprints and a broken branch? Practice, Martinez replied. On Earth, if you can't track properly, you go hungry. If you make noise while hunting, you starve. These Korthok are tough fighters, but they never had to hunt for food to survive. They followed the enemy team for 2 days, learning their patterns. The Korthok always rested during the hottest part of the day. They always posted guards, but the guards got bored and lazy after a few hours. They always used the same camping spots because they offered good defensive positions. On the 3rd night, Martinez and his team struck. They moved through the Korthok camp like ghosts. The enemy sentries never saw them coming. By morning, 15 Korthok warriors had vanished, without a trace. Their equipment was gone, their supplies were destroyed, and the only sign they had ever been there was a message written in the dirt, compliments of Earth. Similar scenes played out across New Haven. Private Katie Johnson's team used the planet's network of caves to appear and disappear like magic. The Korthok would see them in one place, give chase, and find nothing but empty tunnels. Hours later, another Korthok camp would be attacked from a completely different direction. Staff Sergeant Kelly Wright took advantage of the planet's violent weather patterns. When a thunderstorm rolled across the eastern plains, her team used the noise and rain as cover to assault a major Korthok supply depot. The enemy never heard them coming over the thunder. By the time the storm passed, the depot was in flames, and Wright's team was gone, but it was Private Ryan Clark who gave the humans their biggest advantage. The young soldier had always been good with electronics and computers. On Earth, he had been a hacker before joining the military. Now he turned his skills against Korthok technology. Their communication system uses quantum encryption, he explained to Captain Morrison. Very sophisticated. But they made one mistake. They assumed no one else would be able to understand their technology. Can you break it? Morrison asked. Clark grinned. Sir, I've been listening to their radio chatter for 3 days. I know where every patrol is going, when their supply ships arrive, and what War Chief Grakthar had for breakfast. With access to enemy communications, the humans became even more deadly. They knew exactly when and where the Korthok would attack. Every ambush was turned around. Every surprise assault became a trap for the attackers. Vextel watched the daily reports with growing amazement. In 1 week, the humans had eliminated over 200 Korthok soldiers, while losing none of their own. The enemy was starting to avoid certain areas entirely. "I don't understand," Kefla said as she read the latest intelligence report. "The Korthok have better weapons, better armor, and they know this planet better than the humans. How are they losing so badly?" Tekver, who had been watching the human teams in action, had an answer. "Because the Korthok are soldiers, but the humans are survivors. Soldiers fight battles. Survivors do whatever it takes to stay alive." The truth of this became clear during Lieutenant Brooks' night raid on a Korthok communications station. The enemy had placed the station on top of a steep cliff, thinking it was impossible to approach without being seen. They had not considered that humans might climb the cliff face in complete darkness. Brooks and her team scaled the rock wall like spiders. They used climbing skills that most species could never master. On Earth, humans had been climbing mountains and cliffs for thousands of years. What seemed impossible to other species was just another day's work for beings from a death world. The raid was over in 15 minutes. The communication station was destroyed, along with its entire garrison. But more importantly, the Korthok soldiers who found the aftermath began to whisper among themselves about the pale ghosts, who could walk through walls and climb impossible surfaces. War Chief Grakthar received the reports in his command ship with growing frustration. His forces were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. His warriors, who had never known fear, were beginning to speak of the humans in hushed, frightened voices. "They are not natural," his aide reported. "The warriors say the humans can see in complete darkness. They say they can move without making any sound. They say they know things that should be impossible to know." Grakthar slammed his fist on the table. "They are flesh and blood, just like us. They can be killed." "Yes, War Chief. But first someone has to catch them." As night fell over New Haven, Martinez and his team prepared for another hunt. In the distance, they could see the lights of a Korthok patrol moving through the valley. Below, the enemy soldiers thought they were safe in their powered armor with their advanced weapons. They had no idea that 6 humans were watching them from the darkness above, planning their next move with the patience of predators who had learned their skills on the most dangerous world in the galaxy. The hunt continued. War Chief Grakthar had lost half his army to the humans in just 2 weeks. His remaining warriors were scared and demoralized. Many refused to leave their camps after dark. Some had even asked to be transferred to other battles. "This ends now," he growled to his officers. "We will concentrate all our forces on their main city. No more small attacks. No more hunting games. We will crush them with overwhelming power." Grakthar gathered every soldier, every weapon, and every war machine he had left. Over 1,000 Korthok warriors assembled around Haven's Gate, the capital city of New Haven Colony. They brought heavy artillery that could destroy buildings with single shots. They had flying gunships that could rain death from above. They had siege machines that could break through any wall. "Let them try to hide now," Grakthar said as he looked at the city through his binoculars. "When we are done, there will be nothing left but rubble." Inside Haven's Gate, Captain Morrison studied the enemy positions with his own binoculars. The humans now numbered only 37 after all their battles. They faced impossible odds, but Morrison's expression remained calm. "What's the plan, Captain?" asked Sergeant Turner. Morrison lowered his binoculars. "We hold the city. We make them pay for every street, every building, every room." "Sir," said Lieutenant Brooks quietly, "even if we kill 10 enemies for every one of us, the math doesn't work out." Morrison smiled. "Who said anything about dying?" "Turner, how many Zephyrians have you been training?" "About 200, sir. Young volunteers mostly. They're not soldiers, but they're willing to learn." Good Brooks status on our supply situation. We have enough ammunition for 3 days of heavy fighting, she reported. Food and medical supplies will last a week. And Clark, our electronic warfare capabilities. Private Clark looked up from his equipment. I've hacked into everything they have, sir. I can turn their own weapons against them when you give the word. Morrison nodded. Then we're ready. Turner, bring me Tekver and 5 of his best students. It's time they learned what real war looks like. The siege began at dawn. Korthok artillery opened fire on the city's outer walls. The ground shook with each explosion. Buildings collapsed in clouds of dust and debris. The civilian population huddled in underground shelters while the bombardment continued. Advance, Grakdar commanded. His warriors moved toward the city in organized ranks. They expected to find the humans cowering behind the ruins of their defenses. Instead, they found Private Katie Johnson alone on the city's main gate. She sat behind a massive gun that was 3 times her size, calmly firing explosive shells into the approaching army. Enemy soldiers fell by the dozens, but more kept coming. How is one small human holding that position? Asked Grakthar Sade. I don't know, the war chief replied, but kill her. 20 Korthok soldiers focused their fire on Johnson's position. Plasma bolts and energy beams struck all around her. The wall crumbled under the assault. Smoke and fire filled the air. When the smoke cleared, Johnson was gone, but her gun was still firing. Somehow, she had moved to a different position and kept fighting. Impossible, whispered a Korthok warrior. No one could survive that bombardment, but Johnson had survived. On Earth, humans had learned to live through volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and hurricanes. A little enemy fire was just another challenge to overcome. The Korthok entered the city and found themselves in a nightmare. Every street was a trap. Every building hid snipers. The humans appeared from manholes, rooftops, and basement windows. They attacked, killed, and vanished before the enemy could respond. Corporal Martinez led a team of young Zephyrians through the city's sewer system. The peaceful aliens had never imagined fighting in such conditions, but Martinez's calm voice guided them forward. Remember what I taught you, he told them. Fear is just information. It tells you that danger is near. Use that information. Don't let it control you. They emerged behind enemy lines and attacked a Korthok supply convoy. The young Zephyrians fought with desperate courage, surprising themselves with their own abilities. They were not natural warriors, like the humans, but they were fighting for their homes and families. We did it, whispered Tekver after the convoy was destroyed. We actually fought real soldiers and won. You did good, kid, Martinez replied. But this is just the beginning. Stay sharp. As the battle continued, the humans pushed themselves beyond normal limits. Staff Sergeant Wright coordinated 3 different battles at once while treating wounded soldiers and calling in supply drops. Lieutenant Brooks held an entire city block against 50 enemy warriors, using nothing but her rifle and her wits. Private Clark turned the siege into an electronic nightmare for the Korthok. He hacked their communication system and fed them false orders. Enemy units attacked each other by mistake. Artillery fire landed on their own positions. Flying gunships crashed when their navigation systems failed. What is happening? Grakdar demanded as he watched his forces fall into chaos. The humans have somehow taken control of our equipment, his technician reported. Every system is compromised. But it was Sergeant Turner who created the most problems for the enemy. He moved through the city like a teacher in a deadly classroom, showing the young Zephyrians how to be soldiers. His calm voice and steady presence gave them courage they never knew they had. Breathing is important, he told a group of frightened volunteers. When you're scared, you breathe too fast. That makes you sloppy. Control your breathing, control your fear. The young aliens listened and learned. They began to fight with the discipline of real soldiers. They followed Turner's example and refused to give up even when things looked hopeless. By the third day, the siege had become a stalemate. The Korthok had taken most of the outer city, but the humans still held the center. Both sides were exhausted, but neither would surrender. Then Captain Morrison made his move. He gathered his remaining soldiers and volunteers for one final assault. "We're going to end this," he told them. "Not by defending, but by attacking. We're going to hit their command center and finish this war." "Sir," said Brooks, "that's suicide. They have hundreds of soldiers protecting Graktar." Morrison checked his weapon one last time. "Maybe, but they won't expect us to attack when we're outnumbered 10-1. Sometimes the craziest plan is the best plan." As night fell over the burning city, the humans prepared for their final battle. They had held against impossible odds for 3 days. Now it was time to prove that beings from a death world could do more than just survive. They could win. The final assault began at midnight. Captain Morrison led his 37 humans and 200 Zephyrian volunteers through the ruins of Haven's Gate toward the Korthok command center. They moved in complete silence through the darkness, using skills learned on a world where making noise meant death. War Chief Grakthar sat in his armored command vehicle, surrounded by his best warriors. He studied the tactical displays, showing the positions of his forces throughout the city. Victory was close. The humans had fought well, but they could not hold out much longer. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're detecting movement in Sector 7. Probably more of their hit-and-run attacks," Grakthar replied. "Send a patrol to investigate." He had no idea that the movement was Morrison's entire force, creeping through the shadows toward his position. The humans moved like predators stalking prey. Behind them, the young Zephyrians followed with determination born of desperation. Private Clark had spent 3 days mapping every electronic system in the Korthok command area. Now he put his knowledge to use. Security cameras went dark. Motion sensors failed. The electronic locks on weapon storage areas clicked open. "Their eyes and ears are gone," Clark whispered into his radio. "You're invisible to their systems." Lieutenant Brooks led the first assault team through a drainage tunnel that emerged directly under the command center. She had spent hours studying the building's structure, looking for weak points. On Earth, humans had learned to find shelter in caves, basements, and underground spaces. Now that knowledge helped her find a way into the enemy's strongest position. Sergeant Turner and his Zephyrian students attacked from the opposite direction. The young aliens had learned their lessons well. They moved with discipline and precision, using the tactics Turner had taught them. They were no longer peaceful farmers and teachers. They had become soldiers. The first Korthok guards never knew what hit them. Human hands moved with speed and silence. Enemy sentries collapsed without making a sound. The outer perimeter fell. In minutes. "Contact," shouted a Korthok warrior as he spotted movement in the shadows. His warning came too late. Corporal Martinez was already behind him, and the guard fell before he could raise his weapon. The battle erupted into chaos. Korthok reinforcements poured out of nearby buildings. Energy weapons lit up the night as both sides opened fire. But in the darkness and confusion, the humans had every advantage. Staff Sergeant Wright coordinated the attack with calm precision. Team Alpha, suppress that machine gun nest. Team Beta, flank left and take the communications tower. Team Gamma, with me toward the main entrance. The humans fought with a fury that terrified their enemies. Every challenge the Korthok presented was something humanity had already faced on Earth. Heavy weapons fire was like surviving a lightning storm. Explosive shells were like living through an earthquake. Poison gas was like breathing volcanic. Fumes. Private Johnson single-handedly destroyed 3 enemy vehicles with her rocket launcher. When she ran out of rockets, she picked up a Korthok energy rifle and kept fighting. When that weapon failed, she drew her combat knife and continued the battle hand to hand. "What kind of beings are these?" gasped a wounded Korthok soldier as He watched Johnson fight 6 enemies at once. His squad leader had no answer. In all his years of warfare, he had never seen anything like the humans. They seemed to thrive on danger. The more desperate the situation became, the harder they fought. Deep inside the command center, Captain Morrison kicked down the door to Grakthar's personal quarters. The war chief waited inside, holding a massive energy sword. His yellow eyes burned with rage and desperation. "So, the little human comes to face me," Grakthar snarled. "You have cost me an entire army, but you will not leave this room alive." Morrison drew his own weapon, a simple metal blade that looked primitive compared to the alien's energy sword. "Maybe not, but neither will you." The 2 warriors circled each other in the small room. Grakthar was bigger, stronger, and his weapon could cut through metal. But Morrison had something the alien did not understand: the reflexes and instincts of a predator species. Grakthar attacked first, swinging his energy sword in a wide arc that should have cut Morrison in half. But the human was no longer there. He had moved with impossible speed, rolling under the attack and coming up behind his enemy. Morrison's blade found its target. Grakthar roared in pain and surprise. How had this small being moved so fast? How had he seen the attack coming? "Impossible," Grakthar gasped. "My species has been fighting wars for 1,000 years. We are the greatest warriors in the galaxy." Morrison looked at the alien with something that might have been pity. "You've been fighting other civilized species? We come from a world that's been trying to kill us since before we could walk upright. Every day on Earth is a battle for survival." The final exchange lasted only seconds. When it was over, War Chief Grakthar lay dead on the floor of his command center. Outside, the sounds of battle were dying down as the remaining Korthok forces surrendered. Dawn broke over Haven's Gate as the humans secured the last enemy positions. The siege was over. The war was won. But the cost had been terrible. Of the 50 humans who had arrived on New Haven, only 28 were still alive. Many of the young Zephyrian volunteers had also fallen in the final battle. Vextal found Captain Morrison sitting on the steps of the colony's main building. The human commander was bandaged and exhausted, but alive. Around him, his surviving soldiers tended to their wounded and counted their losses. "Captain," Vextal said quietly, "I owe you an apology. When you first arrived, I thought 50 soldiers from an unknown world could never defeat the Korthok Empire. I was wrong." Morrison looked up at the Zephyrian administrator. "You weren't wrong to doubt us. Any reasonable person would have had the same concerns. But you knew you could win," Vextal said. "Even against impossible odds, you never doubted." Morrison shook his head. "I doubted plenty, but doubt is just another enemy to overcome. On Earth, we learned that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about refusing to give up, no matter how bad things get." Tekfa approached with a group of young Zephyrians who had fought in the final battle. They looked different now, harder, more confident. They had learned what it meant to be warriors. "Captain Morrison," Tekver said, "we want to thank you, not just for saving our world, but for teaching us about ourselves. We never knew we could be strong." "You were always strong," Morrison replied. "You just needed to learn how to use that strength." As the humans prepared to leave New Haven, Administrator Vextal sent a message to the Galactic Defense Coalition. It was a simple report, but it would change how the galaxy viewed the small world called Earth. "Human military assistance highly effective," the message read. "Recommend immediate recruitment of additional human forces. Warning: human soldiers appear to have no concept of impossible odds. Deployment should be considered carefully, as they may attempt missions that other species would consider suicide." The message was filed in the Coalition's military database under a new classification: Deathworld Species, Extreme Caution Recommended. Months later, other worlds facing impossible situations would request help from the Pale Warriors of Earth. The humans always came when called, and they always found a way to win, because on a death world like Earth, the only choice was to adapt, overcome, and survive. And humans had been making that choice for millions of years. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. When you really need backup, you call the species that considers impossible just another word for Tuesday. War Chief Grakthar had wanted to face the greatest warriors in the galaxy. In the end, he got his wish. He just hadn't expected them to come from a small blue world that most species had never heard of. But Earth remembered him, and when the next enemy threatened innocent worlds, humanity would be ready. After all, they were the friendly ones.